And good afternoon, racing fans. Welcome to Club Hawthorne Live. Jim Miller and Emily Gullikson coming to you here from our Crestwood OTB location. This is one of our PointsBet Sportsbook locations as well. Emily, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. We've got a new setup today. We're here at Crestwood. We're sitting in the PointsBets area with the OTB on the other side. And we got a full slate of races today, as well as talking some Derby prep action.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of scrolling through here, taking a look at what we have on our YouTube channel as well as we're following things along so we can kind of follow the chat and comments if anybody has comments that they want to jump in with. If I can take a look at it, and it's something that is just something kind of appropriate with what's going on with what we're talking about for the 6 races today or the Sam F. Davis this weekend, we will make sure to comment on that as well. But Emily, you mentioned this location here, this PointsBet Sportsbook. As we look around, it's a beautiful location. It's a very comfortable location. And when you're betting Super Bowl Sunday, they're going to have games, they're going to have horse racing, so much you can do, and there's food and drink here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be packed from all this early signs. So, people that are coming out should have a good weekend.
They should have a good weekend, too. And here's the really cool thing about it. They should have a good weekend. And for us, we're going to be back here in just a couple of weeks as well because they're going to actually give us $1,000 a bet for a pool party, which is something that I don't know if that's the greatest idea or not because – that's a lot of pressure. I think it's an exceptional idea because I've never gotten to play with that much money for our pool parties in the past, but it is. It's a lot of fun. It's a great event. It's a chance for everybody to come out and make a little bit of money as well and just have a great afternoon.
Yeah, they're fun. I've done a couple with Steven, one of the other employees here and one of the horse players in the area. And we haven't had much success, but, with Rebel Day, getting those big pools, the big race on that day, looking for some redemption and some good wagering that afternoon.
Yeah, we were at Villa Park a couple of weeks ago with Howard Kravitz. He was there with Kyle Roscoe and Matt Miller. They had some close shots there, and they were really swinging big for the fences. So it was a whole lot of fun there with the pool party. We had a really good time just kind of going through the race card. That was on Pegasus World Cup Day, so it was very cool to see. But we're going to be out here in a couple of weeks. Hopefully we can make some money. All right, 6 races today that we're going to focus on, as well as the Sam F. Davis. So let's take a look at the race lineup that we're going to focus on. We're going to start at Gulfstream Park with race number 3. That comes up in about 10 minutes. Then after that, we're going to go to Tampa Bay Downs. Then we're going to go to Aqueduct. And then we'll cover the Sam F. Davis and circle back. But Emily, you had mentioned before the show, this could be a little bit of rapid fire action as well because after Gulfstream hits, we're going to have Aqueduct and Tampa right away. The good thing is that the Gulfstream first race we're going to look at has a bit of a standout, so we can focus on some of the other races too.
Yeah, let's start there. So with Gulfstream race 3, which starts in 10 minutes, 10 minutes is the minutes to post, so it should be a little bit longer. The current favorite right now is 1-9, a horse called Expressman, listed as the 5 horse, a horse that is... This horse should win this race, right? It just kind of stands out on all those factors. Now, there are some changes in play as far as the distance. They are adding the blinkers, so that's not always the most positive sign. But you just kind of look through this field, and you're like, he just still seems to stand out over these other horses. It's not necessarily a spot I'm trying to take 1-9, but you're trying to look for, can anybody beat him? Seems like a tough task. Maybe we can talk about some of the horses that are going to present some value underneath, especially keying off that December 23rd race, which is a common race for a couple horses in here. The number 6, the Skipper 2, will come out of that race where he finished 4th, as well as number 1, Chrome Republic, who finished in 5th that day, but that was a sneaky trip. He was stuck behind horses. It was actually kind of better than looked and didn't really get a chance to run and started to run on late. So there might be some upside there. And I know the board's a little bit shifting because of that heavy 1-9 favorite, but currently sitting is about the 4th choice.
And when you talk betting strategies, you kind of have to go a couple of different ways. If you think the favorite's going to win, you can go one of 2 ways. You can look to multi-race wagers and single that horse, or you can put that horse on top of some other prices and try to catch an exacta, or you go the other way and you completely toss the horse and you try to just go bombs away and catch some prices in here. Now, the one thing that I found a little bit interesting about this race, Emily, is you do have the 6 horses in here. Yes, Expressman is clearly the favorite. Puts the blinkers on today, isn't in for the tag, runs for Pletcher, should be 1-9. Probably the horse to beat. But like you mentioned, you can go through some other horses in here and maybe find something that could provide a little bit of value. The Skipper 2, the 6 horse, is sitting at 18-1 right now. That seems to be a pretty good price on a horse that was probably a little bit further back than they wanted to be in that last out. I think maybe sits a bit closer in here, might have to, just because of the short field. But when you're looking at a race like this, Emily, and it's only a 6-horse field, How important does pace complexion become, because you may not have 2 or 3 horses that are kind of considered that cheaper speed?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a higher level allowance race
Yeah.
in general, so I mean, I think that the pace still does have to come into play, and it is a little bit tough as far as the pace because of that 9 furlong distance,
Right.
which they don't run a lot of 9 furlong races. It's around 2 turns here at Gulfstream Park. As we mentioned, we did the Pegasus. They kind of go sort of that long straightaway.
Yep.
So the pace does matter. Another horse in here that is probably kind of worth a mention as they're making their second start off the layoff, and especially keying off the Pegasus, is the number 2 Iconic
Yes.
Adventure. He's making a second start off the layoff, and there were some slight issues before the horse got eased up out of the race, which you don't necessarily like to see, but keep that in mind when you look at that running line alone, that they did eventually take the horse out going around that far turn. And then they're coming back in 23 days. So that can be seen as a positive sign that whatever happened that day, they're willing to just
Right.
kind of draw a line through it. The problem is he's just kind of slow.
And that's the thing, and you have to go one of 2 routes. Okay, what do you take away from that race? Sometimes a rider, if they're just out of a race, they're not going to ask the horse for too much, and maybe it's just the best to just kind of ease out of it and come back to live another day, and that's what you're doing here. And it's, I don't want to say live another day, fight another day, I guess is
Right.
the better way to put it. Here's the thing, it's junior for Bill Mazzo. He's coming back here, he's riding this horse back. So I'm sure they figured it out, like you mentioned. They're coming on a normal turnaround for a racehorse here for a pattern second off a layoff. So the horse could be a fit. It's getting a little bit of action considering you have that heavy favorite at 1-9. So this one at 11-1, and the horse has won at the distance. Like you said, though, the question is just, are you too slow? And maybe that's the case, but maybe it's a horse to look to underneath the clunk up here in the gimmicks. I do think if I was playing the race, Expressman would be my key horse here. I don't know if I would actually more or less even play this race just because of the horse being such a heavy favorite. So I think you have to determine kind of what your betting strategies are from the start and go from there as they head out onto the track.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at those and trying to look at those probables, that even you have a horse like the 2 and the 4 that are currently double digits sitting at 10-1, they're still the second and third
Right,
choice. So, it's just everything's kind of being shifted with that 1-9 favorite. And then you could start to look at some doubles to see if there's a horse that you want to key around. But typically, there's not as much value when you get a heavy favorite into a price versus when it's the other way, where you can oftentimes find more value kind of getting that longer shot horse playing into the chalk. But given those 2 races, we don't really have that as an option. Should we kind of stick with Gulfstream, or should we start doing some analysis at Tampa? Because I'm just worried that we're going to...
I think we should turn over to Tampa here. I'm just looking at the post parade. It was interesting that the 1 and 2 horses both kind of stayed away from the ponies in this spot and just kind of went off on their own. You do get a look there at Expressman. Let's shift over, though, after a second. What do you want to say about Expressman?
Oh, no, I was just going to add that I noticed a lot of horses do warm up there, so it's not that uncommon to see that. But,
okay. All right, so we'll get back to this race from Gulfstream Park in a minute. Let's shift over to Tampa Bay Downs real quick and take a look at the signal from Tampa as they're coming up here. They're in the paddock. They're 12 minutes to post right now, so we will get that momentarily. Then after that, we'll go over to Gulfstream, who currently sits at 16 minutes to post. But Tampa Bay Downs, race number 2. These are $8,000 claimers. They go 1 mile and 40 yards in this spot. It's a field of 6 in this race at Tampa Bay Downs. And looking right now, your 2-1 favorite is the 2 Exacting in here, a horse that looks to show some speed. I thought there were some others that could keep this one a little bit of company. What do the plots show you pace scenario-wise in the second?
Exactly the same, and it could be a little bit vulnerable if they do end up taking the same strategy where they do go to the front. Now, this horse has been able to rate a little bit and go from off the pace, and maybe that's the key, where if it is just kind of the best horse, they'll be able to show a little bit more versatility with some of the other horses in here that kind of seem like they need to the lead and to be up front. But that is the concern with the 2, is if the 2 does get kind of hooked in those horses early, could be a little bit vulnerable, especially when you start talking about horses at short prices and you're trying to pick holes in them. I will mention, I thought it was kind of interesting that the 6 horse actually opened up as the favorite when they first put up the odds. Now, I know there's not necessarily a lot of money at that time, but that horse has been on the drift, and I kind of gave that horse kind of a look to be like, okay, what are they seeing? Is that actual, is that money in there? And that seems like the 6 kind of seems like another horse that might be one of those horses that needs to be on or near the lead and keeping the 2 honest. So were you kind of looking for a horse from off the pace? I think I was as well.
Yeah, I think you almost have to in here. Just try to find somebody to come from a little bit out of. The horse that intrigued me a little bit was the 1. That's I Am That I Am. This is a horse, 5 starts over the Tampa Bay track, 3 of 5 on the board, has gone the mile and 40 in those last couple. Sat a little bit closer in that start 2 back, but they didn't go very fast up front early on. They covered the half of 48 and 2, 3/4 and 13 and change. Got a little bit more pace to chase after in that last out, and I wonder if the jock maybe moved a little bit prematurely in there because you saw a little bit of that middle move and flatten down the lane. I think there's enough pace in here today that the pattern might be to just sit back early on, sit maybe 4 or 5 back, and make one run. But is this a horse that you give a little bit of a chance to in here?
Yeah, absolutely. And currently the second choice right now seems like a logical type, has been running the consistent speed figures that make sense, has that versatility, and also seemed like they were kind of resetting the form cycle in that most recent race back on January 25th. Coming off the win, they stepped the horse back up in class. They're going to come down ever so slightly, and that could just be what they need, sort of that second off. And really there wasn't much that intent as far as intent last out. Now the 5 was another horse I wanted to bring up that could kind of sit that same trip, and always a little bit of a concern, a horse that's coming off a win, and then again that's going to be stepping up in class.
Right.
But this is a horse that has actually run some faster numbers in the past and might be a horse that's in form right now and be able to hold that form to repeat. Now, there are the challenges that come with having to repeat and having to step up in class, but it seems like there's some price compensation, especially if you feel like the 2 and the 1 are a little bit shorter. And same with the 3. The 3 is another horse that's taking some money right now and seems like one of those horses that's going to be kind of in the mix. A horse that does have legit early speed. So their presence in this race is definitely noted. But again, one of those pace-setting types that could get caught up in that early pace.
Yeah, Jock Sanchez chose the 1 over the 5 in here. That was part of the reason I gave a little bit more consideration to the 1. But it's going to come down to value in the end more than anything else as you see the horses heading out there into the walking ring. We're going to shift back to Gulfstream Park, though, as they are getting a little bit closer here to post time for the next race at Gulfstream Park. Our feature race will be the Sam F. Davis Tampa Bay Downs, which is coming up tomorrow. We'll talk about that after we get through the first 3 races. So we're going to have Gulfstream's 3rd, then we're going to go to Tampa, then we're going to head over to Aqueduct. Aqueduct currently sits at 12 minutes to post, so we still have a little bit of time there for those wagers at Aqueduct. Again, we're located at our Club Hawthorne location at Crestwood here. This is one of our PointsBet Sportsbooks locations as well. We have PointsBet Sportsbooks at Hawthorne Racecourse, here at Crestwood, at Villa Park, and at Prospect Heights. Super Bowl is coming up on Sunday. These locations are going to be busy, but they're a great place to come out and watch and wager on the big game. So if you want to check that out, you can do so with the Super Bowl here coming out to this Crestwood location. There's food and drink. There's so much of just a great setup. You see the TVs behind us here. It's going to have horse racing on. It's going to have sports on, and that's the cool thing about it. I think they do a really good mix here. If you're a sports bettor and want to bet the Super Bowl, you can do so. You're not going to have to get up from your table to bet the horses. So that's kind of a nice way to spend the Sunday afternoon if they want to come out too.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned it, I have my Club Hawthorne account open and push it away without having to leave my seat right now. So yes, having those options is definitely key, especially when it's a busy day. It gives you at least that option and to not get shut out and still be able to kind of wait until you get the final number.
Right.
So it seems like they're going to be close to the gate, maybe waiting behind.
Right. I tend to wonder what they're standing for. I mean, it looks like they're now starting to head to the gate. You're getting 2 to 5 on the 5 Expressman, who is, like we mentioned, the most logical horse in the race. I'm going to wait to see. They're scrolling through the exacta gimmicks here. I want to see if anybody shows up with the 5 and for the exact at any type of a value. And like you mentioned before, even if you were to like the 2 or you like the 6, if there's no value underneath, that's the one determination here. So we'll see what happens when we get to the scroll. The 5 Expressman, though, is definitely the horse to beat. We should mention they're on the track in the post parade for Tampa Bay Downs, but Tampa will take a little bit of time there. They go the mile and 40 yards. They're not on the turf, but they are loading in the gate here at Gulfstream. Emily, we should mention for those that tune into Club Hawthorne Live, if it's their first time, we don't bring up the track audio for the race because if we see something that we want to point out during the race, we're going to mention that as well. So it is something to see, but they will get a little bit of commentary from us hints throughout that course of the race to try to help them a little bit with maybe trip notes or stuff that we see over the course of the running.
Yeah, I think that's a little unique, and I think people have appreciated that so far. And already starting with the commentary, you can see the 1 and the 3. We're getting a little bit warm going into the gate, but it's Florida, starting to get a little bit warmer. So getting a little bit warmer here, which I think we can all kind of appreciate.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
Was it last week that we were freezing at Joliet? It was pretty chilly.
It absolutely
was chilly,
was.
But it's nice out here. They are in the gate, though, for the 3rd, so we'll head over to Gulfstream Park, take a look at the 3rd as we're going to full screen with that racing action from Gulfstream Park. Just a field of 6, optional $25,000 claimers. They're in the gate to go the mile and an eighth. See how things unfold here, Emily.
All right, they're off. The 1 seemed to get off a little bit slow, and same thing with the 3 taking a step back. They're being assertive with the 5, which is probably the right idea for the distance and putting this horse in the race, especially when you have kind of the quote-unquote best horse in the race. Sometimes that's the right idea. So the 5 and the 4 are taking out to push the pace. We might be a little bit ahead on the track feed than the YouTube feed for those that are watching there. Those that are watching the YouTube feed, we can pick up right from that start. So a little bit behind on that.
It was interesting. So going into the first turn, you had the 4 challenging the 5 up front early on. I thought that was what was going to give the best chance for anybody to come from off the pace. But then the 4 is taken back a little bit, and they're allowing the favorite to just kind of cruise along on the backside. 23-2 for the opening quarter. So they're going a decent clip. Somebody's racing well off the fence there.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that horse is handling the
track
I think all that well.
Yeah,
that looks like the 3.
Yeah, that looked like the 3. But that horse was way off the fence. It's interesting because that was a horse that's run the majority of the races on the grass too. So that may be a horse that's just better suited for the turf. The 4 is given a pretty good showing of itself here, though. Emily, Montauk Point. This is a horse that's pushed the favorite along. It's not making it easy on the favorite here by any means.
No, it's still taking pressure. The 5 is under a ride, but again, there doesn't seem like there's going to be that much closing in. I mean, the 6 is kind of doing their best, but they're also under a ride. 5 is starting to give it up a little bit, so could be in trouble here for those backers.
Staggering,
yeah. The 5 just lost the lead. The 4, Montauk Point, is going to be taking over. I wouldn't see the 5 coming back at this point, but we'll see. Maybe he's starting to dig in a little bit.
The 4 is leaning on him a little bit here.
The 6 is going to try to get that set up and just kind of ride. Could be a rider's race.
Yeah,
the 5,
the 5
never
is
giving up, is going to come back, just kind of showing that class. But a tight one for those backers at 1-9. It's always, like we mentioned, it's always a little bit when you have a horse that's doing something new and they're experimenting, taking those short prices. Even it ended up going off at odds at 2-5. Those horses that are short prices doing something new can be a little bit of a liability, and it does seem like as we're watching,
it's going to come down to the bob. I think the 5 got it, but
ended up hanging on.
Yeah, it is a tight photo. We'll get back to everybody with the result of race number 3 at Gulfstream Park, but let's head over to Tampa Bay Downs. Race number 2 at Tampa. They are 2 minutes to post for the second, and you do have a field of 6 here. They're going 1 mile and 40 yards. These are open $8,000 claimers in the second at Tampa, and like you mentioned, Emily, nobody's coming from this exact spot back into this race. You have some horses coming from 10. The 5 Warcross is coming from a conditioned 8 into an open field. Some others that were facing that optional company or the starter company. So it is a little bit of a mix of everything in here. Your favorite on the board right now is still the 2 Exacting, but there's pretty much action, at least a little bit, to everybody in this spot.
Yeah.
Are you surprised there's no real heavy favorite, or is this kind of what you were expecting for this race?
I think that's what it seems to be expected. I think that the 2 was pretty safe to assume was going to be the favorite, just based on those recent speed figures, getting that class drop out of that much tougher race in the most recent start, having the experience around 2 turns. But I think that people are kind of seeing the same thing as far as the pace, that maybe there's a lot of horses that are going to press, so they're not making him as heavy of a favorite. And again, the 3 taking a lot of money. And another one that's going to be a little bit forwardly placed, which is actually, for the horse, if you're a fan of the 1, could be a good number on a horse that's been competitive coming into this race with current form. And I saw the 5 warming up, which, in general, I'm not super crazy about horses warming up necessarily. I think sometimes it can take something out of them, but the horse, just as far as the physicality, did look good as they were just kind of jogging out there in the warm-up.
Yeah, and coming back off the win provides a little bit more value. We should make note at Gulfstream Park, the favorite did hold on. The 5 Expressman did hold off the 4 Montauk Point. Was a good effort, though, out of Montauk Point there in that race at Gulfstream Park. Looking back at this race at Tampa, it's interesting. You mentioned there are some horses that are coming out of like races, and the 2 and the 3 Exacting are 2 of those horses. They both raced in the second on January 14th at Tampa, and it was interesting because Exacting probably ran the better race, was actually in the stalking position in that point, did run on late at odds of 8-1. Rattlesnake Ridge was the one that was sent away. This was a horse that tired a little bit at 18-1. And now you're looking at the board. They're both sitting at 5-2 in here. I'm a little bit surprised that there's that much action actually going to Rattlesnake Ridge off that performance and lack of action in that last start out.
Well, yeah, I think that was because you have the horse coming off the layoff.
That
was a tougher race. And I mean, as far as the last, I pulled up that race to look at the chart.
Yep.
And from that race, Rattlesnake Ridge was 12-1 morning line, ended up going off at odds at 18-1. And then as far as the Exacting, who was the 3 in that race, was a 5-1 morning line and not taking much action. So that can also just kind of show some intent that really wasn't the race that they were looking for. And again, coming off the win back in December was probably, again, resetting that form cycle. We talked about it before. Sometimes it's helping fill certain races. And also we see a lot of these horses, I know following the circuit down at Horseshoe Indianapolis, horses will run back a lot and they're not always intended for spots, which you see a lot on the big circuits. You don't see as much of like, well, we're just going to run here and know that we're kind of looking for a race like 1, 2, 3 out. So following that form cycle and where horses are better intended. So it could be a very live sign for the 3 today.
And trainer intent is a very important thing. You make a great point there, Emily, because you look at Rattlesnake Ridge, it had 4 half-mile works leading up to that last start. Then they come off the layoff and they didn't sprint coming back. They said, we're going to go that route and kind of see what they have. It could have been as much of a gauge on where we are fitness-wise going into that spot. And you mentioned trainer intent may not have been the point that we're going to go out and win that race. We may just go out and get our effort that race and then come back to see what we get in that next start out. So that could be the reason why Rattlesnake Ridge is taking that action. Like we talked about before, it seemed like there was a lot of pace in this race here, Emily's. For me, my play would be the one I Am That I Am. Looking at the board right now at 5-2. I would probably just play that horse, maybe win place money on my end of things. How would you look at this race if you were to try to kind of play it or construct any type of a ticket here?
I made a win bet on the 5.
Okay.
Because it's sort of one of those races I could see a number of these horses, and based on the visuals, based on the value, it just kind of seemed like that was the right spot. Now the 1 just dropped down and is going to actually probably going to stick as the favorite.
Yeah.
And that kind of made sense. I think the horse was a second choice on the morning line, so not too crazy. Yeah, and I thought the 5 was fair, and I just couldn't really get to anybody else at the number that they're at for this race. And anything that drifts above 4 is okay with me.
Yeah, and
we should also keep an eye on Aqueduct too, because
there are a couple minutes to post there to the second at Aqueduct. That's going to be where we shift to next after Tampa Bay Downs. Will be the second from Aqueduct. They're $32,000 claimers. Going a mile there, but that will be a very quick shift. So we'll do some rapid fire handicapping on that race at Aqueduct, the second after this race from Tampa. But the last horse getting ready to walk into the gate at Tampa Bay Downs. And hey, this happens at times. Sometimes tracks get very close to one another. It does look like you still have a couple of minutes at least here before that race at Aqueduct, but they are off here at Tampa. Let's see what happens pace scenario-wise in this spot, Emily.
Yeah, it looks like as kind of projected that the 6 is going to have to go from the outside, and that's what they're doing. And also the 4 being a little bit up close in there. Again, our kind of track feed's a little bit ahead of the YouTube. 4 sitting close. The 2 is showing speed on the inside. The 3 is up close, but they're taking hold and kind of raiding off that top pair, where the 4 is tracking kind of right behind. The 1's down inside, and then the 5 is still stalking there. But they want a pretty good clip for that opening
I was just looking at that too.
For the condition and for the track.
Yeah, 23-2 for that opening quarter. You do have 3 horses up there. Like you mentioned, we thought there was going to be a little bit of a pace duel here. It's interesting, actually, that the 4 did take out of it. But looking right now, Exacting got all the way bet down late money there to 9-5. Yeah. That is a horse that's kind of pushing things along. The 6 is still there on the outside. The trip out of the 3 isn't bad. It's just a question of if they're going to have enough horses. It looks like he's scrubbing a little bit on the 1 here, which is a little disappointing to me because that horse seems to be out of it.
Yeah, it looks like the 5 is starting to make an outside move, which would be quite all right with me,
Yeah,
especially moving into that, that 23 and change second quarter there. Yeah, a 5 is definitely in striking range. We'll see if they can run past these top 2 runners. The 2 just took the lead as they're turning into the stretch. Got a pretty good lead. The 3 was able to save ground.
Yeah, the 1's splitting horses here.
Yeah, the 1 is starting to fight on. It's just going to come down to how much late. It looks like the 5 might be the biggest threat. But
did you bet the 5, Emily?
I did bet the 5.
Come on, 5, get up.
With win money only.
Oh,
so I'm
wait,
gonna be a little bit short there.
Don't,
okay.
That's
okay. I'm a win bet type person. Rarely bet to place,
but you're on the right horse there,
yep.
and the horse was 5-1. So
no, there was no regrets on that play. I did have some doubles going, which is kind of a bummer. But you know what? That was no regrets. I think that's what's important too when you're betting is those being like those objective of that being the right play, and if it works out, I do pretty well, and I'm set up pretty well going into the next race. As far as going into Aqueduct too, because they're heading the gate, a couple things real quick. With 3 as the favorite, the actress has been very live. The last 10 starters and this is a sample size that goes back to January 26th. Has sent out 10 horses, 5 winners, 3 seconds, and 2 thirds. So every single horse in the money. But I started to find some trends that in the first part of the month, that barn seems to do really hot, and then around this time starts to slow down. So people might be reacting to that early trend. Now another stat and kind of trend that I found as far as the track profile, which could actually assist the 7 in this case, is the jockey-trainer combination. They've had 5 mounts together, and in those 5 mounts, they've had 2 winners in 3 seconds. So that goes back to trainer intent, making that rider change today. And that's with the barn only holding 9 runners that have finished in the money since 1-1. So that's pretty good that in those 9 runners, 5 have been the jockey trainer combination, and a pretty fair price right now at 7-2, as the 3 is taking a lot of money as your current 3-2.
I'm glad you brought up that horse because I went through the 6 races today. I put a star next to 1 horse that I really wanted to focus on today, and that was Gentleman Joe, the 7 horse in here. 7-2, I think, is a very fair price. I think pace complexion-wise, that sets up for the horses. They are loading in the gate at the second at Aqueduct. This is a horse that I really, like you mentioned, it's a rider change. It's a good combination here for that jock and trainer. I think this horse is going to get a very nice setup in this spot. Musical Heart is really interesting because this is just the second start off a 1.5-year layoff for that horse, and the horse was bet all the way down to 7-5. So I'll be curious. But again, they're not running for 8,000. They're running for 32.
Yeah, I think the barn. I think the barn could have some play, and you could certainly see Musical Heart. But it's another one where this pace scenario could be a little bit more contentious than it looks on paper, and that could play a role. But I think the barn again mentioned those 10 winners, and 4 of them came just last week. So I think that's pretty fresh in people's mind. It was a 4-race win day for that barn.
Yeah, I thought there was potential of the 1, 3, and 6 all to show some speed in this spot as they're in the gate and just heading off here at the second at Aqueduct. Again, this is a 1-turn mile here. We'll see what we get pace complexion-wise. It looks like the 6, Bourbon Bay, actually going to be the one sent away for the lead. And this is a horse that might have the potential to clear in here, too.
Yeah, they should. Like I said, the pace didn't necessarily look contentious as far as horses that wanted to be necessarily on or near the lead, but should be pretty honest. And as they're going into that opening quarter, it's kind of finding some pressure from the 3 as expected. And the 7 stalking wide outside those horses, which is a pretty good trip, or has been a favorable trip at this course and distance, which has been a little bit unique here at Aqueduct. So, and that was one of the patterns that I also found was sort of those outside stalking horses that had some finish. Gentleman Joe being a square, so the square representing some finishing ability. Both the 3 has some finish, and the 6 as well. So we'll see, but. A lot of those horses in with a shot right now. The 5 stalking inside behind that pair. Looks like the 3 starting to get scrubbed along a little bit.
No excuses for the 7.
The 4 is sitting a good trip too, stalking outside as a longer shot in this price. Looks like the 7 just kind of poked their head in front to take the lead. Let's hope it stays that way as they head into the final quarter here, turning into the stretch with the 7 out in front.
It's the trip trip you hope for.
Yeah, that was the trip I kind of expected. The biggest threat right now is the 5, who kind of
Right.
angled off the inside. Looks like the 5 is going to take over.
But here's the thing: no excuses for the 7, and the 7 was 4-1.
Got a great ride. The horse the rider put the horse in the race. Great ride by the 5, being patient. Eric Cancel, inside out trip. But the key, I think, was kind of finding that slight vulnerability on the 3, just as far as like trying to say,
Right.
we saw that trend. The trend might be ending. Time to shift. And that kind of seems a key. And I know a lot of times people look at have that recency on their mind, or looking at what's on paper. And I'm one that tends to lean more towards recency, because that hot and cold can change so fast.
And when you talk about the betting end of things, I mean, that barn, there's been a lot of stories about that barn because of how good they've been over the course of just the last week or so, and it probably leads into that increased betting action. And like you mentioned, the way that you really like to handicap races is you start immediately with that favorite, and then you kind of work from there. Is it a vulnerable favorite, or is it a favorite that's a standout here? And you kind of have to see how things unfold. But in that point, the 3 Musical Heart was 6-5. We felt there was some vulnerability there, and I think we were still we were definitely on one of the right horses there in the 7, Gentleman Joe. It just happened to be the trip there of the 5, Prince of Pharaohs. Another thing that you make a very good point about, though, Emily, is the trips at Aqueduct and the winning trips lately have been kind of those a little bit off the rail, maybe that 3-wide trip kind of stalking the pace and then coming from out of it. And Aqueduct's a quirky track. When it's real cold, it's kind of an inside speed type of racetrack. When it starts to level out, then maybe not quite as much, or at least an even more.
Yeah. I think a lot of those kind of like axioms, like you got to follow them, because it's so hard to tell, and the way that they're trying to adjust the surface. My partner does the strip notes there, and he's been following New York since I think probably before I've been alive. So he has a lot of experience with the New York tracks, and he said he's had just such a hard time this meet in particular, kind of finding where those patterns are. And for me, I'm just kind of looking at the plots and being like, where are those winners coming from? And even the 5 in this race, looking at him, he plots great. He sits in quadrant 2 as a square. Probably if he had a little bit more time to go through the race and do that, we might have been able to kind of get there. But we're moving on, so to speak.
And here's the thing about it, though, too. When you look at trip notes and you look at kind of trying to get a sample size, Aqueduct was a little bit different this year because there were a lot more races run there, because there was the Belmont at Aqueduct meet, so more races over the racetrack. And I want to put this in a way that handicappers, I guess, can best understand is, especially in New York, you would typically have your circuit where Aqueduct was kind of your winter track. Then you would go to Belmont, Saratoga, back to Belmont and Aqueduct. And this year it changed a little bit because there was more of that fall season at Aqueduct. And what it does, maybe it changes what they do when they're taking care of a racetrack, how they maintain a racetrack, what they do for the amount of surface, that kind of stuff, because there's more races being run over that surface. So you have to take that into account. I think it's going to be something that holds true for Hawthorne this summer, because we're not typically a summer thoroughbred racetrack. We're more of a winter track, and for us, we do change the complexion of the dirt. The complexion of the sand that you put on the racetrack, it does change, and that's going to change kind of how that racetrack may play. And when I mentioned it, we're getting to Sam F. Davis in a second, but just so bettors can understand, in the wintertime at Hawthorne, we have more of a coarse type of dirt. And what I mean by that is something that doesn't hold water. We transition over the summer with something that's basically, it's more of they're really small, but it's a round granule of sand that will hold a little bit more water there, and it allows for that track to hold the moisture in a little bit more, because the winter you don't want moisture in the track, and you don't want the track to freeze, so that's the reason why. So you tend to wonder if they did that at Aqueduct, and that's something that just kind of changes maybe the way the track plays a little bit, because they had that extended fall meet there. But looking at those results, 5-7-4 there for that race at Aqueduct. All right. Long-winded is going to lead us into our Saturday feature here, Emily, as our next race will be the 4th at Gulfstream Park. But our feature is race 10 at Tampa Bay Downs tomorrow. This is the Sam F. Davis. It's a grade 3, a 20-point race for Derby points. It's a very evenly matched bunch, I thought. I thought there were a whole lot of horses that you could talk about in this race and make a case for. Who were some of the ones that stood out for you in the Sam F. Davis here for Tampa tomorrow?
I think prior to that, you really have to start with, as you mentioned, it could be an evenly matched group, but the 7 projects to be a pretty heavy favorite, especially with that big speed figure that was earned in the grade 2 Remsen with that win, and this is the spot that they're coming out of. And running back to that effort, I mean, certainly a major player in this race. They have been off 70 days since. That's a 2-month break. This is a different track. I mean, completely moving outside of New York. So there could be some unknowns in there, and as far as the pace, I wanted to kind of look kind of outside the box, recognizing that if WNL runs back to that effort, is going to be strong in here. A couple horses that I looked at, and maybe this is kind of a good place to start, because I think that you had some interest in the 10, and I had some interest in the 4, which are 2 horses that are coming out of the Mucho Macho Man Stakes.
Right.
Now, going back to last week, it was a race that I kind of downgraded as far as those 4 horses that were running back at Gulfstream Park. But in this spot, number 4, Laver, is a horse I'm a little bit interested in, because it seemed like the Mucho Macho Man Stakes for him, in that first start back, it was a 49-day kind of freshening, so this being a second start of the layoff, as far as his overall visuals, suggested a horse that could present a move forward. They ran in a stakes race in just a second start, and those are no small feats. That's a $500,000 race over at Kentucky Downs, and he was still a maiden at the time. And ever since that debut, the horse just improved speed figure-wise, so if you can project another move forward, could be sitting right in the numbers, and already in the numbers that stacks up with the others in this field.
Yeah, and here's the thing. This was a horse that was coming out of the 11 hole in a 1-turn mile at Gulfstream in that last out, so you have to think you're trying to work positionally wise to not get hung wide into that turn. It may not have been where they wanted to be tactically. You never know, but you come over here to Tampa for the spot we mentioned. We didn't really love in prior weeks when you're seeing horses that were coming from Gulfstream to Tampa for overnight races. It's a different story for stakes races. When you have the Derby points on the line here, you maybe wanted to duck some of those horses in that race last week at Gulfstream Park. Tampa's, for them, it's just a trip down the road, basically, at this point, with Derby points on the line, and you get that route race. So I'm with you. I like Laver. I think this is a horse that is definitely in with a shot. It's going to be the 3rd start out since the addition of blinkers in here. Every right to improve in that spot. Now, the other one I know you're talking about was Dreaming of Kona, right? This was a horse.
I thought that was one that you mentioned.
It was a horse. Okay.
I'm interested in, to be honest.
Okay.
I thought he
Yeah.
He ran a good race. He was promoted via DQ. Just as far as comparing Laver to the number 10 Dreaming of Kona, I thought there would just be more upside, but I'm interested to hear where kind of you fell and what your logic was as far as the horse.
Sure. For me, more or less anything, it's going to be the second time stretching out. And I can't say around 2 turns, because, again, that was a 1-turn race for Gulfstream at that mile in that last out, but just trying to go the distance. And it's kind of that heat check for the horse to find out, is this a horse that can handle the 2 turns in this spot? They may find out that it can't, and this is just a horse that's going to turn out to be a sprinter, but you have to take that opportunity somewhere, and I felt that this was maybe the chance to take that opportunity with Dreaming of Kona to say, okay, we're going to find something that's maybe a little bit softer than what we might see at Gulfstream Park, but we can still make that determination if we can go the mile and a 16th and cover the distance. So that was what intrigued me with Dreaming of Kona, a horse that I thought could be a little bit of a factor. I want to jump back to WNL just real quick here for one question with you, and that's with a horse that won at Aqueduct in the Remsen and ran really well. Now, I know Danny Gargan has a lot of his horses down in Florida right now, but I know he surely has some horses still up at Aqueduct. This was a horse that probably would have been a very heavy favorite in the Withers, looking at it as well, yet they're down here at Tampa. Do you think that's just as much of a function as the trainer wanting to keep his eyes on the racehorse coming into the 3-year-old campaign?
It could be, because when I'm looking at the works, they've been down in Florida since January 3rd, so they clearly, after that race, just kind of decided we're going to point to something in Florida rather than stay up in New York. So I think they kind of already had their plan as far as that goes. But yeah, it does kind of question like why they did that. But looking at those works, they kind of seem to have either this race or something at Gulfstream sort of in their plan. So I think as far as intent, this is at least where they want to be as far as being racing in the state.
Yeah, we should mention they're just about to walk onto the track for the 4th at Gulfstream. We'll get to that in 1 minute, but any other horses here for the Sam F. Davis that you wanted to touch on, Emily?
Yeah. The number 6 Classic Car Wash, this is another horse that's coming out of Gulfstream Park, another horse that's just developing race to race, and that is as far as numbers, and I think his visuals suggest even as much. If you want to go back and watch his races, it is worth watching, because it seems like a horse that just is figuring things out and getting better and better. He's showing versatility as far as his running style, showed versatility as far as the surface, handling that 2 turns at Gulfstream Park, even though it was over the Tapeta. Now he is going to be moving back into open company, but again, has been really dominant in those races, and I think that it's worth giving this horse a test at this point. And just from a physical standpoint, seems like a horse, he already has that established around 2 turns and looks like a horse that has that 2-turn build to him.
Yeah, and Jaramillo's going to come over from Gulfstream Park to ride, so you know there's confidence from the jock and the horse horse as well, and that's an important thing. That was the reason I gave a little bit of a look to the other Cassie runner, Champion's Dream, in here. Tyler Gaffleone is going to be riding that horse, and Champion's Dream, the other Cassie horse, ran a pretty good race at Tampa, going 7/8 in the Pasco in that last out. That was with the addition of Lasix. You can't race on Lasix in a graded stake, so you come off Lasix. I don't know if that's going to be a big issue or not, but I thought it was a pretty decent race. I guess distance, again, is going to be the question, because breeding doesn't necessarily suggest I guess it does. Mile 16 would justify in there, but Champion's Dream, I'm curious to see, based off those 4 starts, if this is a horse that can be competitive going a mile and a 16th. Did you give the horse a look in here?
I didn't.
Okay.
I really, in general, kind of finding those common races.
Yeah.
The Pasco, which is typically a prep for this, I just didn't really think that was that strong of a race this
Sure.
year, and just didn't really want any of the horses out of that race, or really much of the horses that had been running at Tampa in general, because there are a couple others in here that are, whether they're maiden winners or coming out of that common allowance race back on January 13th. So I'm looking outside those horses.
Yeah, it is. It's a good race. It's a good betting race, Emily. I think you're going to be able to find some value in this race. So we'll see what happens with the Sam F. Davis tomorrow at Tampa Bay Downs. But let's head over to Gulfstream Park here. Race number 4 at Gulfstream. We go to the turf here. We're listed at 3 minutes to post. It's going to be a little bit of extra time. After that, we'll swing back to Tampa Bay Downs and Aqueduct to round things out. $50,000 maidens in the spot. We do have one scratch here. Take out the 7. That's a Red Selfie Boy. So it leaves you with a field of 7. Looking at the board right now, 2 horses at 5-2 here in the 3, and on the outside horse, the 8, Lieutenant Stan. So you can't even say you start with the favorite, but you start with one of those 2 horses. What did you see pace complexion-wise, and what do you see out of this race here for the 4th?
Yeah, I mean, in the maiden races, sometimes it is tough to kind of assess pace. But, I mean, as far as you're starting with the number 8, Lieutenant Stan, it is a horse that's going to be stretching at around 2 turns for the first time, coming out of those sprints. So it just does have to call into intent. If they were really intending this horse to stretch out, probably could have happened in the past, because it's not like this is a horse that's making their 2nd and 3rd start. They have raced a little bit. Now, they're likely to show more tactical speed today with that distance change, and especially coming out of the most recent sprints, which is probably the reason they are going to run long, and something I've mentioned on here before, that in those turf sprints, you have to show early speed. Even on the 5 furlong sprints, you have to be out in front, and that kind of compromised Lieutenant Stan last out. As far as the number 3, another horse that they're going to have to show speed with. Going back and watching that race, that replay, it looked like the horse wanted to show early speed, but just couldn't. He just wasn't on the level. He didn't have as much speed as those other horses, so they are adding the blinkers today. Seems like, as far as the visuals, probably the best case scenario is to put that horse forward. I just still have questions just overall if that horse is good enough, but I can see why the public would gravitate in his direction because of the connections, because it is a 2nd start, because the horse is dropping in class. All those things that, like, on paper kind of pop this horse up. One of the horses that I was interested in this race is actually kind of on the feed right now, which is the number 1.
Looks good, too.
Yeah. Going back to the debut race, which is in against Maiden Special Weight Company, had trouble in there, and the overall visuals projected this horse to improve. And then he had some traffic and trouble issues in that most recent start, and they are going to stretch out, and seems like it's going to be a positive for this individual. Yeah,
we are 1 minute to post here for the 4th at Gulfstream, so we will pop up that feed here momentarily. But we should mention, like you said, Victory Line. I'm with you. I like that horse. I like the price. 6-1 is a very good value for a horse that I think should get a really nice trip. You touch on Lieutenant Stan. They gave this horse 5 tries against Maiden Allowance Company. This was a $145,000 OBS purchase. They're in for the tag today for 50. So it's one of those things where I don't know if anybody's going to jump in for the 50, but they kind of said, okay, maybe we're not quite up to snuff at that level. We have to come down a little bit of a notch here. So I'll be curious to see what Lieutenant Stan shows up. That is the current 2-1 favorite. But I'm with you. I really like the looks of the 1 Victory Line in this spot. You get Lasix for the 2nd start today. This was a horse that was actually claimed for the 50 out of that last out. So you're coming first off the claim here, and that's the only thing. The barn doesn't win a ton first off the claim. They have won first off the claim in the past, but it's the inside draw for the 3rd straight start of its career. And when you talk about horses trying to get a little bit of an education, sometimes they have to figure that out. Some can get intimidated as a younger horse breaking along the inside. this one's already done it twice. Maybe that could be a little bit of a benefit going into this spot just from having that experience in the past too.
Yeah, and having uncomfortable trips in both of those, I think, Junior Alvarado sticking aboard is a positive, kind of learning something from those first 2 starts. And there actually has been intent to run this horse on 2 turns on the turf. He was a vet scratch back on December 29th. They were entered at this condition at 7.5 furlongs, which, as we know, is 2 turns on the turf. Down at Gulfstream Park.
Yeah, and looking at this, like you mentioned, I mean, I always love when a horse is claimed and a rider is able to get back on board, because when you're trying to do that, and one of my many jobs in the past, I used to be a jock agent, and there were horses that a rider would like and a rider would ride, and it would get claimed, and you have to go and basically say, I want to get back on that horse. I like that horse. And some barns have their riders that they stick to time and again and again. Some don't. So you have to think there was some intent here that either the trainer liked how Junior fit this horse, the connections, or Junior said, hey, I want to go back and get on this horse, and then you have to do a little bit more legwork to try to do so. But the fact that he's remaining on this horse, you're getting 6-1 on the board, I think that is something that is a definite positive sign here as they're crossing over to the turf to go the mile. We should make note they are on the track here for the 3rd at Tampa Bay Downs. Those are $10,000 claimers. They're going 7/8 of a mile. Looking at that, yeah, they're 2-1 on the 4 there. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, we'll jump there in a second. The only other thing I think is worth mentioning is there is a first-time starter at Gulfstream Park in this race with the number 5 retired. He seems to be taking some money, and watching this horse work, as far as the visuals, should be able to handle today's track and surface. And the fact that this horse is taking money could be a live sign for a barn that, like you mentioned, doesn't win a whole lot with this type of horse, but is certainly capable with the right horse. And maybe this is the right time and place, because there's really nothing in this field that you can say this is the previous race where it kind of felt like we did have the horse to beat. I don't think there's any real strong horse to beat in here that a first-time starter, especially a well-met one, could pop up.
And yeah, the horse looks pretty good walking into the gate right now, and the horse is not in for the tag, not in for the 50. So they're protected that first start out here, whereas everybody else could be claimed out of this race. So the connections must think they at least have a little bit of something here if they're not going to expose that horse for the $50,000 price tag in that first start. And it's one of those things where when you work through conditions, if you're in for the tag, it kind of changes things optional claimer wise for what you're eligible for down the line too.
Should we talk off this feed?
So looking at this one, we can go off either. Everybody can kind of catch up as we go along here. They are in the gate for the 4th at Gulfstream. We should mention 4 minutes to post here for the 3rd at Tampa. They're in the paddock for the 3rd at Aqueduct, but they are off here at Gulfstream Park, and there's actually numerous horses that got away pretty well in this spot too.
And a couple that didn't, with the 1 and the 4 seemed to break a little bit slow, and the 1's being a little bit rank as they're trying to shift that horse to the outside there. And it looks like the 3 is taking the lead as expected. That was the horse that was stretching out off that first start, where it looked like they tried to show some speed on debut. With some of those others, the 8 outside pressing and the 2 sitting in that pocket trip. 6 has got some cover. The 1 continued.
The 1's keen to go, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a little bit rank, and they moved the horse outside, which is probably better than at least being stuck down inside for a 3rd time in a row, getting that horse at least into some daylight. So we'll see from there. Fraction-wise, pretty comfortable out on front.
Yeah, 24-2 for that opening quarter. We'll see what they get the half, and 49-2. So they're not flying by any means. It is a firm turf. These are maidens as well, so not your top-notch horses. But the 3 who you mentioned should take some action there off that last start out did. I'm liking the trip of the 1 right now. I like that Junior got the horse into the clear, and it looks like he's got a little bit of run as well.
Yeah, definitely has a little bit of run, which is a positive. We'll see if that, kind of ground loss and wasting some energy early doesn't cost this horse in the end. But we'll see. It looks like the 6 has some run, who was able to stay covered up and move to the outside. But we'll see as they turn into the stretch with the 3 along the inside. Seemed like the 1 did flatten out a little bit. The 2 was able to save
There's your 5, the first timer running too.
Yeah, the 5 is going to run that.
He might run by.
Yeah, 5's going to. Whoa, it's going to be tight. The 5 got there.
Yep, 5-3-6 it looks like in the 4th at Gulfstream Park. We did mention, though, the 5 again. It's a barn that there had to be some sort of intent in there for the fact that they didn't run for the tag in that first start out. You get Tyler Gaffleone as well.
And the horse took some money, and then off those works, which were sneaky, there was a slow 5 furlong move back on, I forget where it was, but it's going to show like 105 in the paper. And going back and watching that work, it was actually a 3 furlong move with a really heavy exercise rider. So a lot of times, that's why I'm always hesitant when you look at the workout times on paper, what they're actually, doing. concerning because if you go back and watch that work, it was certainly they weren't looking to get a 5 for a long time that day, so kind of dirtying up the form, and the horse being that new face was able to pop up and get up right over the 3 at the wire.
Yeah, we'll shoot over to Tampa Bay Downs for the third as they're on the track there, a couple of minutes to post in that spot. One note, too, though, is, again, you talk about the favorite, and when you get a vulnerable favorite, we thought Lieutenant Stan was vulnerable in that spot, and there were some opportunities to beat the horse, and it definitely did happen. That horse ended up running out of the money there in that race at Gulfstream Park. Now, in the third at Tampa, they're 1 minute to post here. They're going 7/8 of a mile, so this is out of their chute. This is that long run down the backside there. There's a horse that we are very familiar with from races at Hawthorne and some races that have been successful at Hawthorne. That's the 4 Dr. Ann, who currently sits as your 2-to-1 favorite right now. This one from the barn of trainer Mike Campbell, Sammy Camacho in the saddle today. So let's start with Dr. Ann. This was a horse that was really good at Hawthorne and Colonial. Kind of tailed off a little bit, though, in those last couple.
Yeah, I mean, I think this horse is okay in this particular spot, but there's just no value as as currently 2-to-1. Doesn't have an edge in this particular race. Has those back numbers. Certainly has some form that would make the horse competitive. Seems to be moving forward as far as the form cycle, but again, just in this competitive race is not offering much value currently at 9-5, especially with some others on the board.
Yeah, looking at some others on the board, I had some notes made on the 6. That's Woods Hole in here. This one currently sitting at 5-2. This is a horse that is making its 4th start out of the meet at Tampa, went 7/8 of a mile and was victorious in that race 2 back. That was at 8-3. Again, this is an open 10, but you're looking at those starts 2 and 3 back. Outside draws in each of those as well. Went 3/4. I think it was just too tough in that last out. I think this is a little bit easier. Can you make a case here for Woods Hole in this spot?
I thought this was a horse that was going to take a lot of money because it kind of looks a little bit dressed up on paper, and this is going to be even a step up from those conditions, non-winners of 2, non-winners of 3. So as far as value, again, another horse that just seems a little bit short, but one I kind of thought that the public was going to gravitate in that direction for those races and creating some value on some of the others, and that's kind of leans towards those inside horses. Number 1 is getting a positive rider change. The number 2 is coming in with a little bit fresh. The numbers on par. The running style fits. Just could be in the right time and place. I thought the 3 was okay, but one of those horses that value is needed.
Yes.
And they're being a little bit. There's some compensation there with the horse at 6-1. The 5 is also fits the profile and could be a possible rider upgrade as well. Another horse that seems like a pretty square number in this race. So I think there is some value to be found.
There is. You know what? The 5 is intriguing, Magic Girl, because you get Alonso Quinones. Like you mentioned, this horse had a bug rider for the last 5 starts. Now you go to the journeyman rider, who's a very solid journeyman rider. I'm a little bit surprised to see this price here. You're looking at 6-1 right now on Magic Girl. The horse went 7/8 in each of the last couple. It was a very legitimate effort in that last out, and it was against that open $8,000 company. To me, that it's probably the value. I think this is a race where you could take a stab, take 3 or 4 of those horses that provide some value potential here, and maybe work around some gimmicks with those.
Yeah, you certainly can, and especially with some of those horses, if you feel like the 4 and even the 6 are in that underlay category, it really comes down to now just kind of creating those bets and finding a key of who those horses are. And in this spot, that just makes it a little bit tougher what horse you want to key around. As far as the 5, I mean, it definitely is a drift because the horse was a 3-1 morning line, which can go either way. It could be a positive or a negative. So tough to say, but at least there's some compensation in there.
I'd look there over the 4, though. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, the 4 and the 6 are just too short. They can certainly win, but that in a race where there's really not much of an edge of those horses over the others, just in terms of form, in terms of speed figures, in terms of pace, there are certainly other ways to go.
And the 6 just became co-favored there at 2-1. I would stay away from both of those. I think I would probably maybe work my wagers around the 5 Magic Girl and then see if you could hook it up with a little bit of a price in here. But Magic Girl would be the one that I'm sitting on there. So, by the way, our friend John Walsh jumped in to say that Joe Orseno was 30 or 0 for 30 with first timers. He's not wrong, and we did talk about that a little bit in that last at Gulfstream. Now he's 1 for 31.
Yeah,
and at 21 bucks.
I mean, I did a lot more a lot more deep diving as far as because I see what those stats are, and again, it's something you want to keep in mind. overall, but especially when you know, if the horse is a super short price, then that stat really starts to jump up. But when you start getting some price compensation, you start looking through the field, and it's like you really can't land on any others. And that being the one knock, especially if you have, you know, for me, if I can look at a horse, that to me is the key, and it's even the edge, because a lot of people will just kind of default to the stats, especially the trainer stats that are printed on paper, and you can start finding some value by actually looking at the horses as individuals, watching races, watching these works, the sales videos. Looks
right,
like
you have to take the resources that are available to you and then make that determination. So they're off at Tampa. We should make note, walking to the gate at Aqueduct, that'll be our final race of today's Club Hawthorne Live. But as they roll down the backside here at Tampa, you're having your two favorites kind of pushing things along on the front here early on, too.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of looked like that. The pace was kind of a tough read as far as like who was going to make the lead here. And I think that's why they are being a little bit assertive with those horses that were more or less the most likely, just getting those horses into the race and putting them in position there. We'll see. And the one was a horse I kind of gave a look to, had that positive rider change. It's getting pressed. Pretty solid opening quarter down inside. I mean, the four's traveling well as far as, you know, if you're backing the favorite in this race, they've been doing a good job putting the horse in the clear and keeping to the outside as the four starts to take the lead as they're rounding the turn. Looks like the 6 is starting to be under a drive, stalking outside as the 1 starts to back
hoping the 5
up.
runs on
the 5's got some run. She's between horses and starting to make a run. 4, they're getting into the 4 a little bit, so your 5 is looking good. If they can find some finish right here, we'll see.
Right, and this may be as much of the case of the Journeyman taking over for the Bug Boy, because Quinona's a really good move to split horses there at the top of the lane and kind of got up alongside Dr. Ann and maybe surprised that one a little bit.
Yeah.
This is a really good ride on this 5 horse.
Excellent ride. And that in the end made the difference, being able to stalk and being a little bit assertive. But again, the key is being able to find those horses that are vulnerable favorites or just offering no value, which was the case on the 4 and the 6. Were horses that were capable. We kind of leaned to the 4 a little bit more than the 6, but again, were horses that were short price, and the 5 getting overlooked off that 3-1 morning line offered some value. All right, we're right up on Aqueduct.
Yeah, let's switch over to Aqueduct here because they're loading into the gate for the 3rd at Aqueduct. So rapid fire handicapping for you, Emily. You have a field of 6. What do you have here for the 3rd?
Yeah, we've got a kind of a quick handicap here with the 2, which is currently your favorite in here. Piece of My Heart going out for Linda Rice, and probably the reasons is a horse that's getting some class relief. I think it is obvious but kind of unexciting. I thought the 5 was a little bit weak, who's currently the 2nd choice right now as 5-1 coming off the layoff for today's race shape, and especially the 7 furlong distance. Didn't get a chance to look for the front wraps on the 4, but that was something I had made a note that I wanted to maybe see that as a positive, so somebody was able to note that. But currently 8-1 there. And then I thought the 6 had a bit of a look, though certainly taking money, just as they're putting the 6 at the right level.
Sure.
The horse has been a little bit overmatched, running in those longer races. Kind of seems like they're going to cut back there. And looks like, yeah, it looks like the front wraps are on the 4 as they're heading towards the gate.
Yeah, the front wraps on the 4 here. This is it's an intriguing race, $80,000 optional claimers. They go 7/8. We get back-to-back 7/8 of mile races, and you don't see this distance run that often. I actually wish they would have run it more because the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint is at 7/8. I love the distance. I think it brings more horses in from sprints and routes and kind of combines them together. But we'll see how things unfold. Our final race here for Club Hawthorne Live. Our time's flying by again, Emily.
I mean, especially today because it was like boom, 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 race, boom, 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 like go quick, and there were races where it was just there was a lot to talk about today. Looked like the 4 got off a little bit slow on there, and the 3 is kind of starting to show some speed. Pushing towards the lead. They're taking a patient approach with the 2, which is pretty familiar for the horse's run style. The 3 getting tracked by the 5, about what sort of expected as far as the pace. Doesn't look like they're going fast. They haven't posted the fractions yet, but looks pretty moderate as far as the visuals. And the 6 is sitting clear on the outside right now. 24 for that opening quarter.
And we saw a horse come from that 3-wide trip in that last race at Aqueduct and was victorious.
Well, I think they moved inside out. I think the
5,
did they?
Okay,
yeah, the 5 was able to save ground and move inside out.
The 1's going to try to get through here.
Yeah, but that 7 did kind of stalk outside. Yeah, the 1 was able to kind of make that rail run. The 4 is still pretty wide, but could see a number of horses from this point in time. The 2 is still your favorite and kind of being pushed along a little bit, so
it is.
Could be a little bit concerning for that runner, but maybe not. They're starting to find some run. Doesn't seem
Right. It was a smart ride and a smart move on the one. Secret Love, Dylan Davis had no choice but to try to save ground and get through, and he was able to do so. But you mentioned, here's the 4 now,
With that
kind of
outside
swooping
stalking
up with
trip.
that overland route trip, too. And this is a horse 9-1.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that outside stalking
yeah.
trip seems to be pretty good, and now the 2's kind of try to fight and battle for place as the 4 is clear. 4-2-1-5 as they come under the wire.
Yeah, so 4-2-1-5. Here's the thing as we close out our day for Club Hawthorne Live, and I want to touch on Aqueduct because we watched 2 races from Aqueduct where both of that winning move kind of came from off the rail in the lane. It meant that you could save ground, like you mentioned, through the turn. Is that something that if you're betting this card for the remainder of the day, then do you kind of make that determination that I think that's kind of the trip that you get now, or do you need to watch another race or 2 to see if it's going to be kind of that outside move type of trip if you're trying to play the remainder of a card at Aqueduct?
I mean, to me right now, I think that the racetrack seems to be playing fair.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't seem like any of the horses have been compromised as far as trip. I think, horses might be getting good rides, but this is a race where, I mean, the 2 being the favorite just kind of had a hard time of it, even from early on, sort of surprised that the horse dug in to get second, and really there just wasn't much showing up from the other horses, so it's hard to say. And then in the race 2, the 5 got a great inside-out trip, got that first run, had some pace to close into, and the 7 stalking outside, so I wouldn't put too much into that as far as the track results. I think it's generally playing pretty fair, and I mean the 1 ran a good race, being on the inside and saving ground and kind of making that early move for a horse at a bit of a price.
Yeah, a bit of a price there on that horse as well. 9-1 on Easy to Bless, the winner there of the 3rd at Aqueduct. Brad H., thank you for tuning in today. It looks like Steve D'Amico tuned in as well. Chris Krumick, John Walsh, Dakota Schultz. A lot of folks tuning in, so it was nice to see that in the chat again. We are going to welcome people to post comments in the chat. We can't always get to them, but when we can, we will make sure. At least Laura Scamser checked in earlier as well.
Oh, good.
And
Hi,
Laura is just a great fan of Hawthorne and her OTBs and everybody there.
And a good horse player.
Yes.
Really good horse player, watches a lot of races, makes trip notes, so yeah.
Yeah, so we saw Laura tune in as well. Again, it's a really good feature tomorrow. The Sam F. Davis, you have the Withers taking place. The El Camino Real is taking place. So you're starting to see some Derby points come up. And then you're going to have all the Baffert decisions that have to come up as well, Emily, because by the end of the month, they have to make their determinations on where these horses are going to be able to get points. So it will be interesting here for the Triple Crown and Derby scene as well. But hey, 6 races in an hour, we kind of we get to take a breath as well. But it's one of those things that it's amazing how quickly everything goes by too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is so how you play. Like when I'm at home, it's like that too. Looking at the board, looking for opportunities, pass play, staying on your feet, staying nimble, and being able to adjust it and make plays as necessary.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to have multiple races up on multiple screens.
Absolutely.
You do all your homework and so much homework ahead of time there for the notes on who you want to focus on, and then equate it to who provides value as well. So it's one of those things where it's a little bit of a lost art. People get stuck on a horse and that's it, but you have to equate it to value and what you can get out of a race as well. So Emily, fine job today. We do want to make note, hopefully we can make money for everybody in a couple of weeks as we're going to be back here at Crestwood for a pool party. $35 for the pool party. Get some food, drink, program, part of the betting pool, and they're giving us $1,000 to wager too.
Yeah, it'll be good. Oaklawn, it's one that I follow, have been following for years, doing notes there. You can follow the analysis, the daily analysis for Oaklawn on the Hawthorne site under the picks to kind of follow along and sort of see some trainer trends. So I'm looking forward to it in general. And making some money and betting.
It's a great site there, the new Hawthorne Racecourse handicapping site, because there is so much on there. It's not just the live races, it's full card simulcasting, it's multiple analysis. The plots are always available for Hawthorne when live racing returns too. That's a track that you do a great job of focusing on as well, and you'll have the optics plots. But do make note, for any of these optics tracks, and I just wanted to be able to talk about and promote it a little bit. The folks for optics put in so much work, so much time and effort. It's trip notes, it's watching replays, like you mentioned, workouts. There's so much involved, but it's really good information too.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's unique information, and it's information that's going to give you an edge, right? Because your information is really only as good as the value that it provides. And so, along with having those plots at Hawthorne, throughout the whole entire meet. It also has the past 3 run lines, so you'll have
Yep.
those trip notes as well. So really gives you a full picture for people that just jump in. Maybe they follow another circuit, can be right up to date and be able to play Hawthorne, having that information in front of them.
It is nice to have that information. So much information is out there for everybody. It's how you interpret it in your efforts to try to make some money. All right, week 4 of Club Hawthorne Live is done. We're going to be right back at the same location here next week. Emily, we're going to be here at Crestwood. This is one of our PointsBet Sportsbook locations. It is Super Bowl weekend that is coming up. I don't want to ask you for any gimmicks or anything. Is there a team that you prefer? Do you prefer Kansas City or the Eagles?
Oh, I'm just looking to do my grocery shopping during the game.
Hey, the store is going to be wide open. That's the time to do it. So I love that. That's one of the best answers I think I've ever heard. One of my favorite wagers for the Super Bowl, and I hit on it last week, and it's a really weird wager, but it's quarterback rushing attempts. And what it is you pick the team that you think is going to be the winner, because a quarterback kneeling down at the end of the game counts as a rushing attempt. So last year, I bet Matthew Stafford over for the rushing attempts. It took him kneeling down on the final play of the game to hit the over there. But it was one of those fun things that keeps you involved for the entire extent of the game. There's so many wagers to play. If you wanted to play those, you can come out to any of our PointsBet Sportsbook locations here at Crestwood, at Villa Park, at Prospect Heights, or at Hawthorne Racecourse. So for Emily Gullikson, for Dakota Schultz, for Jason, Nate, and Matt, our TV crew that does an awesome job, we want to thank everybody for tuning in to Club Hawthorne Live, and we will see you again next week. Good luck.